Hi, I'm Ann Marcotte, and I'm a neuropsychologist based in New York City, and I'm on the faculty of the Department of Psychiatry at Columbia University. I'm also one of the founding members of the Women in Neuropsychology, or WIN, subcommittee of Division 40, now Society of Clinical Neuropsychology. I've been asked to start our symposium today by giving you somewhat of a historical perspective on women neuropsychology prior to the founding of WIN in 2000. I'm happy to do so and will lend some of my own personal experiences during those early years of neuropsychology as an example, which I believe is fairly typical of the experiences of many women neuropsychologists in my generation. Division 40, now SCN, was founded in 1980, and it was indeed during the early to mid 1980s that I was doing my graduate school training and later clinical internship here. When I think back to all of the courses I took as a graduate student and clinical practica during those years, it was the case that I only once had a woman as a supervisor or teacher, and in fact, it was only as a teacher of one class and no clinical supervisors. When I got to internship in 1985, I did finally have a female supervisor, but it was in a child clinical position and not in a neuropsychology position. So clearly in the first formative years of neuropsychology, the vast majority of faculty and clinical supervisors were men. Well, neuropsychology as a field rapidly expanded in the next 20 years, as did Division 40. Division 40 grew from a group of 400 members to over 4,000 members in 2000. And that year, over 33% of the membership was women, which was also a significant gain. However, the representation of women in Division 40 leadership roles and election as fellows fell far below that 33%. From 1980 to 2000, of the 56 possible elected Division 40 leadership positions, only 7 of them were filled by 5 women. And here are the positions and the women who held them. During those same first 20 years, only 17% of Division 40 fellows were women neuropsychologists. So clearly representation of women in leadership and in fellowship positions was far below the 30% of which women represented the division. As we know, there are many barriers that women face as neuropsychologists, many of which my fellow symposium presenters will be discussing in coming presentations, but there definitely are barriers to women as they seek leadership roles in recognition for excellence. I had the pleasure of serving the division as secretary for 7 years in the 1990s, which was an unusual time to be a woman in leadership in our field. I am sometimes asked, how was it that that happened? And my answer is simple. It was one of sponsorship. I was very fortunate early in my career to meet several eminent neuropsychologists who took a very active interest in my career, who served to promote and sponsor me, and to really push me to seek positions and recognition for excellence in a way that I probably never would have on my own. As I advanced in my own career, I saw the growing need for women to serve as mentors and women to serve as sponsors in neuropsychology, having had my own personal sponsors been men. I was truly delighted when Paula Scher contacted me in 2020 and asked if I might be interested in joining an initial organizational meeting for a possible Women in Neuropsychology subcommittee of Division 40. I had vivid memories of that conference and that meeting in particular. During that meeting, I had attended the Division 40 Executive Committee meeting, which is a day-long event, and it was even more saliently clear to me at that point that I was the only woman at the table. To go to the WIN formation meeting was really a remarkable change and a breath of fresh air. It was clear at that meeting that there were numerous agenda items for WIN to undertake. The one that has been the one I was most interested in helping pursue was indeed developing a program of active mentoring and sponsorship to promote and support fellow women neuropsychologists to seek leadership positions, as well as APA fellow status. Here we are 20 years later, and I'm happy to say that tremendous progress has been made towards that one mission. There is still clearly a large need and a strong need for us to continue to promote the voices of women neuropsychologists in many areas in our careers. Since 2016, slightly more than 50% of Division 40 members are now women, and I'm happy to report here in 2020, 38% of our fellows are now women. We've also had numerous women elected to leadership positions within the division, and I just list off down here the ones that the current 2020 year shows us. I also love to end this conversation and presentation by highlighting the picture below, which is from the Society of Clinical Neuropsychology website. which clearly shows a meeting in progress. I look at this and it makes me smile because it tells me so vividly the progress that's been made in 20 years since I was that only woman at the table at a meeting. Just seeing this picture really tells you the tremendous progress that's been made. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to now turn this over to my fellow symposium presenters. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Paula Scher, and my role in this symposium is to talk a little bit about the initial formation of WIN. So to set the context, this chart shows you the percentage of all elected officers in APA Division 40 in the 20 years after the formation of the organization. And you can see that only a tiny percentage of those were women. It was my experience that it was really important to have women at the table in order to be able to bring this organization into fruition. My role at the time was I was liaison to the APA Committee on Women in Psychology, and I was also the scientific program chair for the division. And in those roles, I was a member of the executive committee, and I had the opportunity to talk directly with the leadership team about the need for increased representation for women. I think that a lot of women who were on committees at this time and earlier will tell you that we did a lot of counting on our fingers. Walk into a room where a meeting's being held and count how many women are there, look at a scientific program and count how many women are actually presenters. So I was grateful and fortunate that the executive committee awarded us a small amount of money to hold an organizational meeting of the group that eventually became WIN. So this meeting occurred February of 2000 at INS. It was meant to be an extremely small meeting. So I bought tea for everyone and invited 10 or 15 women to come to the table and talk about what this fledgling organization might look like and what our aims would be. What happened in reality was that more than 70 people came and squished ourselves into this very tiny meeting room. We didn't advertise the meeting. There was just enormous excitement and interest in forming a group for women in neuropsychology. It was a very gratifying group and lovely to see all these women coming together. We formed our first steering committee at that meeting. I want to mention that there were so many amazing women who participated in the development of WIN, and only a small subset of them were on the steering committee, but lots of people played really important roles. So in terms of some of our early initiatives, one thing that happened early on is that we learned that there was actually an earlier group that was also called Women in Neuropsychology, and it was made up of true pioneers, women who were in the field when there were no other women in the field, and they used to get together for dinner at meetings to support each other. And so once we learned about the existence of this earlier group, we invited them to come and do a symposium. It was absolutely fascinating and probably one of my favorite events that we've ever done as a group. We now have a listserv that has more than 700 members drawn from multiple different countries. One of the major early initiatives was to identify highly qualified women, encourage them to be nominated for different roles, and then to support their candidacy for elected office and for APA fellowship. This was one of the primary ways in which we went about equalizing numbers of women in the division in leadership roles. We also have done regular programming at professional meetings, 1 or 2 programs a year, continuously for the 20 years that WIN has been in existence. So very quickly, talking about moving into the future, I think that the current pandemic is just an illustration of how we can never really anticipate all the different ways that we may need to intervene to support women in their professional development. As we all know, COVID-19 is an example of a crisis that disproportionately affects certain people. It has disproportionate effects on our colleagues from minoritized groups. It also has disproportionate effects that we probably are only beginning to feel in terms of putting excess burden on women who are in caregiver roles. And so we foresee changing and evolving needs of women through history, and when hopefully taking a lead in providing services for professional development. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to talking about these things during our in-person meeting.
Hi, I'm Eileen Martin, and I recently retired from the faculty at Rush University Medical Center. Before that, I was at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And I'm here to talk about some things we wish we'd learned in graduate school, but didn't. Our career path is complicated and in ways that we sometimes don't understand. A lot of people get out of graduate school and assume that their deep knowledge and their work ethic will be enough to carry them through and help them advance. On entry to the world of work, there was a rude awakening in store. That's because there are many unspoken rules and expectations that are going to influence your career progress, what you do, and how other people see you. And we never learned that. So let me talk a little bit about some examples of this. First, you can't assume that your good work, your achievements will be noticed. It's your job to bring your achievements to the attention of your boss, your chair, or anyone else in power. This is not showing off. This is keeping people in the loop about what you are doing so that they will be up to date on all your achievements. Second, if you want to succeed, you have to accept that not everyone's going to like you. And that's a tough one for a lot of women. We were brought up oftentimes to try to please everybody, but that doesn't work in this situation. There are always going to be people who are threatened by what we do, and so they're never going to be pleased. So just don't worry about it. Third, there's nowhere it says that you have to be totally responsible in doing all the work on complex tasks, such as a journal article, a grant application, or your promotion papers. Asking for help is never a weakness. Asking for help is a strength, and it's absolutely necessary. You can ask for input from your peers, your colleagues. You can reach out to women who have expertise in what you need to know about, women who sit on editorial boards for journals, NIH study sections, or on promotion committees. And these work. In the past 20 years, since WIN began, women in neuropsychology have made unbelievable progress in increasing their name recognition, their national recognition, and getting the respect that they deserve. I'll be looking forward to the question and answer, but that's it for now.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Cabu, and I'm very proud to be part of this panel. I'm going to share just a few thoughts regarding women in leadership. And if you allow me to, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, I've entitled this Moving from Impossible Selves to Authentic Selves. I want to freely acknowledge that all I'm providing are some very big, broad bullet points, and there are a tremendous amount of literature underlying much of what I have to say here. But my hope is that this will help some of you make sense out of things and also provide the start of a roadmap to help all women in leadership positions and those who aspire to leadership. One way in which we can start to think about women in leadership is to rely on social role theory. And leaders elicit a set of expectancies based on people's characterization of them as male and female. And these expectancies can be construed as gender roles or the shared beliefs that apply to individuals on the basis of their socially identified sex. There are two aspects of gender roles that are important in leadership: agentic and communal. Agentic attributes include things such as assertiveness, controlling, confidence, and they're typically ascribed to men. And actions that underlie these kind of agentic attributes include things such as speaking out, influencing others, initiating action to complete tasks, problem-focused actions, and innovation, which includes a combination of self-confidence and daring. Communal attributes have to do with the concern with the welfare of others, kindness, empathy, nurturing, interpersonal sensitivity, most often ascribed to women. And the tendency is to focus attention on the group rather than oneself. It can include more tentative speech, supporting others, and addressing relational and interpersonal problems over direct problem solving. So these are two different kinds of attributes of leaders that have gender connotations. So gender role expectancies exist in organizations and provide an implicit background identity. And these gender role expectancies, which we're all well aware of, are shared by subordinates, peers, and leaders, and are often internalized. This creates a problem when gender role expectancies are discordant from leadership role expectancies. And this can result in a double bind, or as Iber and Petriglieri state, impossible selves, in which maintenance of women's gender role may result in a failure to meet the requirements of a leader role, whereas conforming to a leader role may result in failure to conform to their gender role. I would have hoped that by now we did not have to deal with these kinds of expectancies and this kind of a double bind or these impossible selves, but that is not the reality in which we find ourselves now. Certain cultures, it's more problematic than in other cultures, but this is where we are. So the question is then, how do we start moving from impossible selves to authentic selves? And very, very briefly, the leadership literature indicates that perhaps the most important things you can start to do is figure out your core values. Once you have clarity regarding your values and what is important to you, it can help you make those important decisions in terms of where to focus your energies versus not. Similarly, you have to know your sweet spot. You have to know your strengths and have a realization of your relative weaknesses as well. But you want to leverage your strengths. You want to use your strengths. You want to build your strengths in your leadership journey and path to help open doors and to be the best that you can be. But you want to be the best you can be for a specific reason. And that's probably the most important and critical and difficult, quite frankly, leadership task. As Twain said, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. People become leaders by internalizing a leadership identity and developing a sense of purpose. What are you leading for? What are you leading toward? What is your goal? How are you going to do this? Every single woman on this panel has a specific leadership purpose and a goal that we are aspiring to make the world a better place. Why is this? How does this interact with gender expectancies? My experience has been is that once you have a well-crafted leadership purpose and you become known for that purpose and you establish the social capital and the credibility where people trust you, know this is kind of what you stand for, not only does it embolden you to try and stretch your wings as a leader, but it can also add some legitimacy to women as a leader because you're no longer acting solely for yourself to try and forward your personal self, but you're acting on behalf of this larger goal, which is one way to kind of work around and work within these different expectancies. And so that's a pragmatic piece of advice that I've observed with others as well as in my own leadership path. And I want to emphasize that leadership is influence. It is not necessarily a title. So effective women leaders, I think the most effective women leaders combine these skills. They have clarity regarding their values. They clearly know their strengths and they play to those strengths, and that they also have a clearly defined sense of purpose and what they're working towards. There's a goal, there's a mission there. That can help women achieve their leadership goals and aspirations. What I think is even more incumbent and important, particularly for women at the mid-career and later stages, are to use some of that social capital they have to challenge these expectancies to make it easier for younger leaders, so that effective women leaders leverage their unique superpowers to fulfill their authentic life mission. And so that over time, as we see more and more examples of women in leadership positions in which they have equal amounts of agentic communal leadership traits and behaviors and characteristics, people start to see the superhero that lies beneath that white coat. Thank you.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome. My name is Dr. Monica Rivera Mint, and I am a board certified neuropsychologist, a cultural neuroscientist focused on health disparities work. I am so happy to be here with you, joining you for APA's first virtual conference and within Division 40's Society for Clinical Neuropsychology's programming to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Women in Neuropsychology group. The main focus will be discussing barriers and facilitators of leadership development and implementing dynamic and culturally tailored approaches to career development and mentorship as one way to foster leadership moving forward for early career women and non-gender binary folks, and those really across the lifespan. In my comments today, I am focusing really on myself and what was the biggest barrier for me, and briefly talking about facilitators for leadership development, which had to do with having such incredible mentors and sponsors. Regarding the second point, I think that the way forward for our field is towards taking a more intersectional approach. I am one of the founding members on our inaugural steering committee for this group, and it's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since we first got this effort started, and it is incredible to see how far we have all come as a field, and for women in particular during that time. Today, I briefly just want to say a couple things and reflect on what it's been like to be part of this effort, especially in this moment in our history. When I came to WIN, I had not anticipated getting into a career that would include leadership as part of my my journey in my career, but Dr. Paula Scheer, who I'm forever grateful to, reached out to me, and the rest of the inaugural committee was so welcoming. And as not only as a woman, but a Afro-Latinx Indigenous woman, I really never thought that leadership was part of my path, but thanks to them and their incredible mentoring, they got me in the door, and that started my whole career in leadership. And I'm just so grateful to all of them and for the incredible sisterhood that WIN has really spearheaded in our field. It's been really inspiring to see our growth over the last 20 years. And one item that I have focused on as we look now towards the future of WIN for the next 20 years is that I strongly believe that we now need to start pivoting more to women in their intersectional identities and LGBTQIA+ and non-binary persons, and increasing our focus on these intersectional identities and how we can become a more inclusive WIN for everybody and provide provide more resources, mentoring, and leadership opportunities for all of us, not just some of us. As we wrap up, again, I want to thank APA, Society for Clinical Neuropsychology, and this year's amazing and fearless program committee, who's put together such an incredible program despite the many challenges that we're going through at this current moment. I want to highlight to all that we can assure a vital future for our field through diversity and inclusion, especially when we remember that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. With that, I want to say muchas gracias and thank my collaborators and all of my students and junior colleagues who make all of our work possible. If you would indeed like to follow up with me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Dr. Rivera Mint. Hope to get a chance to chat with you again on August 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I thank you so much for your time here today. I encourage you to get involved in WIN and leadership, and I encourage you also to follow up with me if you have any questions. Thank you so much.